Multiple international NGOs and some in Israel have condemned Israel's bombardment and siege of Gaza, as well as the forcible transfer of up to 1 million Palestinians from the north of the territory to the south. Some of them have already started using the language of war crimes. Now, Fleur Hassanoum is the deputy mayor of Jerusalem. Here's what she thinks of those judgments.
Are you saying also Beit Salem are wrong and they don't know how to assess the situation?
Categorically, they're wrong because we warn people. We warn the people of northern Gaza to move to southern Gaza specifically and precisely because we know that the Hamas infrastructure, there's a whole city underground full of weapons, full of rocket launchers. And because we didn't want innocent civilians in harm's way, we asked them to move out of the way. So yes, I condemn Amnesty International, which everybody knows is biased and corrupt to its core, and B'Tselem, who've lost their marbles.
Okay, we'll leave the viewers to judge that. I'm wondering, do you also then condemn as biased and lost their marbles 48 UN experts who say, quote, in a statement, "We strongly condemn Israel's indiscriminate military attacks against the already exhausted Palestinian people of Gaza. There is no justification for violence that indiscriminately targets innocent civilians, whether by Hamas or Israeli forces. This is absolutely prohibited under international law and amounts to a war crime." Are you telling viewers Amnesty is wrong, B'Tselem has lost its marbles, and the 48 UN experts are also biased and wrong?
Well, all you have to do is look at the UN schools in Gaza and the West Bank to know.
Fleur, you're not answering the question. You're not answering the question, Fleur. You're not answering the question. Please answer the question.
You're not letting me answer. You're not letting me answer the question and get to my point. What I'm saying is, how can I hold UN so-called experts to any type of expert opinion when they are managing a curriculum that teaches hatred and how to kill Jews, anti-Semitic, and completely obsessed with the right of return, which is the destruction of Israel?
Imagine living under a mayor who really truly believes the messages being given out by the Israeli state that, you know, these warnings we warned the population they could leave. So the fact they haven't the fact they haven't left, they're being bombed to shit. The fact they haven't left, that's on them. That's because they've stayed. They should have, fought harder to go. They should have evacuated. We allowed them to evacuate. No consideration of the fact they're evacuating from a tiny, hugely densely populated territory. No consideration of the fact that they know if they go to southern Gaza, it's very likely that the territory that they have left will no longer remain, even nominally in Palestinian hands. We've got the foreign minister of Israel literally saying we're going to reduce the amount of territory that Gaza has to call its own. I want to get your reaction. Is there anything to be done when someone has drunk the Kool-Aid to such a degree that they really believe what the Israeli state is doing is almost a humanitarian occupation where they're trying their very best for these poor citizens who they just want to get rid of the terrorists. They just want to get rid of the terrorists and then they can all come back and live great lives.
I don't think that the deputy mayor of West Jerusalem does really believe the things that she's saying, because you saw it in that sort of crazy spinning Catherine wheel of her last comments, which when pressed on the fact that 48 UN experts had condemned the indiscriminate shelling of Gaza, span around from UN schools are teaching Palestinians to hate Jews, they're being raised to kill Jews, they're obsessed with the right of return, they're anti-Semitic. It really was just a word salad of all of the Hasbara talking points. And I think that signals a kind of desperation when media audiences are being presented with the truth. Because I don't think that representatives of the Israeli state are or ever have been reliable interlocutors for the truth, whether that's having, accused Palestinian rockets of misfiring and killing 5 people in Gaza. That was last year in 2022. It turned out to be an Israeli airstrike, or whether that's blaming the children who were killed on the Gaza beach, blaming the fact that the IDF killed them on the fact that there had been militants operating in the area. There had been no militants operating in the area. This is a web of lies that Israel spins in order to cover for its aggressive and expansionist, and I think highly illegal policies, which have been about pushing out the Palestinian people. So I don't think it's about persuading someone who genuinely believes the things that they're saying. I think that she's got a genuine belief that the actions that Israel have taken are justified in the interests of Jewish people and the Israeli state. I think she's sincere in those beliefs. But I don't think she sincerely believes that this is some kind of, great humanitarian extended hand to the Palestinians. I think that it's plausible deniability, and it always has been.
I have to disagree. I've seen so many, I've been trying to keep tabs, as it were, on peers who I would describe as, Zionists or liberal Zionists. And the messages I'm seeing out of them is this fervent need to believe that the project they're part of really is good at heart, that there is a moral high ground. And I really do think that the deputy mayor of Jerusalem has to hold on to this idea that Israel and the project that she believes in has the moral high ground at all times, because that's also, the idea that the country was founded on this safe haven for Europe's Jews, and that it would always hold up a morality, and that it would, represent this idea of never again would there be, Europe's Jews be subject to the genocide that they were during the Holocaust. And in return, that has turned into this project of occupation, of ethnic cleansing, of persecution of Palestinian people. And the idea that if you say to someone, this mirrors these behaviors of ethnic cleansing, this mirrors, genocides of the past, the denial is so great that we would never do this. We are a state that believes in morality of all else. And I really do think that belief of morality, that belief in almost, perpetual victimhood, no matter what you do, we can never be the aggressors. We can never be the occupiers. Whatever we do, it's always in both self-defense, and it's part of this greater mission, the security that is needed for the Israeli people, which they then, the Israeli state tries to conflate Judaism with being Israeli, because that provides this protection, this wider protection. If you bring every single member of a diaspora into that mission, especially if they're a persecuted religious minority, that is a huge amount of rhetorical protection. We talk a lot about, Hamas using, they say you use Palestinians, they use civilians as human shields. Well, I think Israel, the rhetorical use of people as human shields for the actual occupying mission, for the actual ethnic cleansing policy that it's pursuing, I really do think part of that is that they have to believe, if you're committed to the Israeli project, the Zionist project, you have to believe deep down you are doing good. And I genuinely don't think that there is, this, this is just a mask, we really know what we're up to. I think there really is this it's when you're radicalized, you commit to something on a deep level. And the reason I think she has that incoherence is because, if we actually went logically through it, those arguments fall apart. But as someone who, I wrote about this recently in a piece, but when you are challenged on politically incoherent beliefs, you start just throwing out everything out there. Like, but what about this? But what about this? What about this? Everything that you've lined up previously when you're being challenged in a way that is easier to rebut, that you have your key lines that you come out with. But I think the fervent belief in her heart is that, these things are there, and she just, when she's actually challenged on them and it falls apart, all she can go back on is the fact that she has this faith that she is a good person belonging to a good project, but none of the evidence around her actually supports that anymore.
I don't think that deputy mayor of West Jerusalem is a liberal Zionist. And I think that the position of liberal Zionism within Israel is becoming more and more politically marginalized, because annexation and settlement expansion is now the mainstream of Israeli politics. The idea of moving the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, I think, really emboldened that set of politics, as well as Jared Kushner's, peace strategy, so-called, which was all about normalizing relationships between Israel and the Gulf monarchies, so that the Palestinian cause could effectively lose a massive chunk of international support and be sold out. All those things have, I think, really marginalized the cause of so-called liberal Zionism in Israel. Second thing is that what has been demonstrated, I think, since the failure of the Oslo Accords, and more precisely the failure of Israel to uphold or implement the Oslo Accords, is that Israel can't really claim to be a safe haven for the global Jewish diaspora anymore. It is evidently a hell of a lot less safe for Jewish people than living in the UK or living in America or living in other European countries, even in spite of the kinds of anti-Semitism that we've been talking about on this show this week. Jews in the diaspora are safer, measurably safer than Jews in Israel. So I think that you don't necessarily have that right of return wave of migration being driven by liberal Zionists anymore. I think it's being driven by people who are an awful lot more religiously motivated and are people who tend to be on the far right nationalistic expansionist end of Israeli politics. That's something which has really changed in the last few decades. And so the final point then to come to, which is, well, how do you talk to people who have a very sincere belief in liberal Zionism? I think, of course, you can persuade people. And of course, you can talk to them. And I think that part of it has to acknowledge that, you know, we're talking about things which are very core to people's identity. The IHRA definition of anti-Semitism said it's totally anti-Semitic to conflate, Israel with Jewish people in the diaspora. And I agree, it is totally anti-Semitic to say that Jewish people in the diaspora are responsible for or answerable for the crimes of the Israeli government. But I think that what you can create a little bit more space for is that there is, I think, sometimes a very deep connection that comes from a history and often a family history of persecution in Europe and what Israel has represented in terms of a place of safety and a place of democracy. And that's a hard thing to dislodge. But I think that with facts and with empathy, you can begin to persuade people. It's difficult, it's not easy. But I think that one of the things that, you know, if not now, you read a lot about it in Jewish Currents, Jewish Voice for Peace as well, NAMOD. These are organizations of Jewish people in the diaspora, many of whom have gone on that journey. And it's not necessarily that they end up in a place of going, okay, well, that means Jewish people don't have a right to live in the, land of historic Palestine. They don't have a right to live in safety in Israel. But it's about really looking at what the basis of that safety is and how you can achieve that, not at the expense of the Palestinian people. I think that, that there is a significant minority of Jewish people who have gone on that journey and I think are open to being persuaded, but it has to be done, I think, with extreme empathy for where that position of liberal Zionism comes from, even though I disagree with it politically, even though I've got huge criticisms of it politically. I think if you're going to open up that conversation, you've got to understand where people are coming from first.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just want to clarify, I don't think the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem is a liberal Zionist. It's just a rhetoric I'm seeing running from liberal Zionists all the way down to the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, who is obviously probably very committed to the Zionist project if she's risen to that political rank in the current political climate that is in Israel.